Good morning, everybody. You may have seen my previous video that I made about Paladin Vanguard and why it's really fun to play. However, I mentioned in that video that I was actually going to be retiring that character. I'm retiring it not because it isn't good, but because I wanted to take some time to really embrace some of the new features in the game and make some more modern characters that felt really strong. And so we take Vanguard Paladin, which did feel very good, and turn it into two-handed fighter Charisma Paladin, but not quite in the way you would imagine a regular Charisma Paladin would go. With the release of the Fey Dark Illusionist tree in November of last year, people were finally given the opportunity to play a pure Charisma Paladin. Before, you would have to get yourself a Dynastic Falcata, one of the few melee weapons in the game that scales with Charisma, and try to fight someone to play that. However, Paladin has received a lot of changes. One of the most major change is the change to its influence on favored weapons. Paladins used to not really care about which weapon they used, but now Paladins have an ability called Ascendancy, which grants them more melee power and ranged power when they attack monsters that are undead or outsiders with their favorite weapon. Now, a lot of bosses tend to be undead or outsiders, so if you want to give up on 75 melee power, you're probably going to use your favorite weapon, as that's going to supersede anything else. Now, when it comes to two-handed fighter Paladin, my understanding is that the best build for two-handed fighter Paladin is something along the lines of playing a strength-based Wood Elf who uses the Falchion favored weapon ability from Wood Elf to use Falchions, grab yourself a Tail of Sulamates, grab yourself a lot of strength, and go and beat up some monsters. That build does sound really fun, but I wanted to take Paladin in a slightly different direction. You see, there's a weapon that was released called the Eidolon of Shadow from the latest raid, the Dryad and the Demigod. The Eidolon of Shadow is just like the Shadow Blade weapons in that the Shadow Blades use Charisma to hit and damage as a baseline. However, this weapon doesn't just disappear when you decide to log out. Instead, it is an eternally persisting weapon. Yes, it does come from a raid, but the raid is fairly easy, and as a result, getting one of these bad boys is not too tough. So I have a two-handed Greatsword Shadow Blade, which is very interesting. This does come with the weird limitation of meaning I have to actually level with Charisma to hit and damage, because this character that I'm playing right here uses specifically Charisma to hit and damage. Leveling with Fey Dark Illusionist and then having to swap out of it wasn't really that big of a deal though, and the benefit of using the Eidolon of Shadow is that it saves me all of the points that I would normally have to spend and the feat to get access to Fey Dark Illusionist, but still have Charisma to hit and damage. And since the Eidolon of Shadow is a Shadow Blade, that means it deals pure force damage, ignoring all of the normal damage reductions of monsters, or at least it should in theory. As of right now, that's not how it works, as since being a Paladin, you make all your weapons good, and your weapon becomes force and good damage. The weapon itself has this weird property, where because it is good damage, the game says, okay, well this is a good damage weapon, but what damage type is it doing? And it doesn't know what to do. So it defaults to something within the Paladin's actual, not the Paladin, sorry, the Greatsword's actual weapon and says, well, this is a Greatsword, so clearly it has to do some type of slashing damage, and as a result means that your beautiful force damage just turns into some type of weird, neutral physical hit that actually gets dunked on by most damage reductions, and it causes a lot of problems. So initially the idea didn't seem to work. However, I am happy to report that this bug is being fixed for update 50, and this is going to apply to all of the weapons. So not just the Eidolon of Shadow, but the Shadow Blade short swords, as well as older items like the Druid's Flame Blade, the Mirana of Flame, and Valorius the Flame Blade from the latest raid, as well as Realia the Ice Blade and the Ralvin of Frost from the latest raid as well. And even older weapons such as Sireth's Spear of the Sky. Actually, I don't think it's Sireth, it's Celestia. I was thinking of Celestia, but either way, Sireth is a cool weapon, but still Celestia, which also does purely light damage, will get fixed with this to have all the bypass in the world, which means if you still have a Celestia kicking around, you'll be very happy with how the weapon is going to work in the future. Now, I'm not playing strength-based Paladin here for a couple of reasons. Number one, I just like the idea of using Charisma as the main stat for Paladin. It fuels a lot of their abilities, gives them their saving throws, gives them their lay on hands, and allows them to make all sorts of goofy charisma-based skill checks without actually having to do too much of an investment. I'm really having a lot of fun with this character, and I've decided I'm going to be keeping it around for quite a while, without doing any form of reincarnation on it, and just using it for endgame raids. Since it hits like an absolute truck, it's fairly beefy, and it's really, really fun to play. So I decided to make sure I got the appropriate cosmetics as well, to make sure my character looks extremely good and fresh as I continue to play around with it. Now, if you're like me, and you really love the Paladin class, and you want to see what type of things you can get get done with your actual Paladin build, please be sure to check out the following video section of this video, as well as the link in the description for the full build, where you can see all the items I've used and every single decision I made during the process and how to level with it. It's important to note that this build was designed entirely with the item, the Eidolon of Shadow, built around it, which means that in the future, if there are no more items that support the charisma to hit and damage as a baseline style, then this build will have to be changed to accommodate the fact that you want to stay charisma to hit and damage as you continue to play it. So just keep that in mind, and especially if you want to use another type of weapon, say you want to use the Black Razor or another Greatsword. Again, those are good options, but they just don't really work entirely with this build without any adjustments. So if you do want to play with one of those weapons as opposed to the Eidolon of Shadow, you will need to make an adjustment, as I just saw the Eidolon of Shadow and thought to myself, charisma to hit and damage Greatsword. There's a build in this, and I bet it's Paladin. If you ever want to hear about how I come up with some of these build ideas and go through them, make sure to check out the live stream at twitch.tv/Strimtom, so that way you can keep up to date with what's going on and what kind of new builds are coming down the pipeline. But with that being said, I'll pass it over to me with the build. Now, if you're looking to play a strong but charismatic two-handed Paladin for endgame content, R10s, and raiding, then look no further than this build that I have for you right here. Now, this character is a pure Paladin, level 20 Paladin, focusing on Charisma as my most impactful stat. So not quite so much strength or other things, it's mostly Charisma. In fact, it's entirely Charisma that makes this character work. This is the character that I use for R10s as well as endgame rating, and I am quite enjoying it as far as melee DPS goes. So to actually get this character started, one of the most important things is having enough strength to take care of all of your two-handed fighting feats. I would say pretty much the limitation of this build is you want to have a +2 tome. This is a 36-point build, so starting with a 15 base strength and then using a +2 tome to get it up to a 17 so you can take all the feats is pretty important to the build. Outside of that, start out with as high charisma as you can, put all your points into charisma because that's your main stat, and then constitution for the rest. As far as your skills go, you don't really have any. Use Magic Device is the main one. If you don't have any tomes, then that's pretty much it. But if you do have tomes, grab yourself Intimidate and possibly also Heal here, as these skills are also kind of useful in, when you need to heal yourself and others. Having some extra spell power is kind of nice, and Intimidate is just useful for different situations. Since your character is in fact a charisma-based paladin, you can also just craft items to kind of sub in the slots here, like Bluff or Intimidate, whenever you need extra stats in those areas. As far as the feats go, it's pretty straightforward. I actually leveled this character in a different way than most, and not than most, but like then it might look. Essentially, I took a magical training. I couldn't think of the feat. Magical training at level 1 to allow me to get charisma hit and damage out of the Fate Arc Illusions tree. However, I have swapped that out as I don't use magical training anymore in place for just regular toughness, and I'll explain to you why. However, this character for its deity, I picked Onatar. You can use a Greatsword with a Paladin without actually needing to pick a Greatsword deity, which means Onatar's Forge gives me a button I can press for 10 extra melee power, which is kind of nice for this character. I also took Beloved of the Divine and Child of Faith for extra damage with martial weapons for an extra +4 to hit and damage. Precision's pretty good, and then improved critical slashing, as well as all the proficiencies with two-handed fighting. A full list will be put out on the DDO forums if you're at all interested, if you want to find more things about the exact path that I took to pick up those feats. Other than that, the epic feats are fairly straightforward, overwhelming critical being very good, epic damage reduction being pretty good. Now I got perfect two-handed fighting. I took Pierce Adamantine. Turns out this character doesn't actually need Pierce Adamantine because of the specific weapon that kind of makes this whole thing work, which is what I'm going to talk about right now. So this character's main goal is met with this weapon right here, the Eidolon of Shadow Greatsword. So this is not the best Greatsword in the game, and it's not the best weapon for Paladin. However, it's a very unique weapon with some cool properties, and that's why I wanted to use it for this character. The main reason why it works so well is because it gets charisma to hit and damage as a baseline. You'll notice you don't see the word strength here because you can't actually use strength with this weapon. This means if you want to play this build exactly the way that I'm doing it, you gotta get yourself an Eidolon of Shadow. Because since it uses charisma hit and damage, I don't actually need to have charisma hit and damage out of the Fate Arc Illusionist tree, allowing me to save 7 points on my actual character itself, making it cheaper to spend and giving me options to buy stuff in other places. With that being said, not only that, It also deals force damage. Now, this weapon currently is a little buggy and doesn't properly deal force damage. Instead, it kind of uses the magic and good tags to default it onto like a different base damage type. So it doesn't really work properly. That's problematic. However, apparently this bug is being fixed with update 50, and so this weapon will actually deal pure force damage and just fully ignore the damage reduction of regular monsters that exist out there, which means your force sword is going to be fantastic. However, there are two situations where this force sword won't work that well. One is against monsters that are resistant to magic in their entirety, like golems. You're just going to deal half damage to golems, and you have to deal with that. And the second is monsters that heal from force. As far as I know, the only one in the game that does that is Helmed Horrors, but this character actually cannot kill Helmed Horrors in any capacity. Even weapon swapping doesn't work because you don't have charisma to hit damage on any of their weapons. So don't do quests with Helmed Horrors and you should be okay, or if that does happen, just watch as other people take those things down for you. But that's not how it works right now. That will be how it works in the future. But since it's charisma to hit and damage, I actually didn't need to take this Pierce Adamantine. Because there's a bug that makes it so you need to actually bypass, I need this now. However, as update 50 comes along, you won't need this instead, and I will update the build guide to show which feats you should take instead. And then as far as legendary feats, Scion of Arborea. For Paladin spells, take the good spells, Bless, the extra Righteous Command, and Angel Skin for PRR and MRR and melee power, as well as Prayer for the extra +5 to all your important stats, Magic Circle against Evil, Holy Sword, Zeal, Death Ward, kind of just writes itself. As far as the enhancements go, enhancements right here, I've got 41 points spent in Knight of the Chalice. I took 3 points of Divine Might here because I like to have it on a 2-minute duration. I'm not too great at remembering to put Divine Might on, so having it last longer is really nice. And then instead of taking 3 points into the improved second strikes for more strike through, this is also an option instead. You could put 3 points here and 2 points here. Depends entirely up to you. I just went this route because it seemed more important. I didn't take the extra +1 to attack and damage down here. These are nice stats, but they cost 2. And as this tree has a lot of really good stuff in it, so I want to make sure I took all the good stuff. Grabbing the +2 to hit and damage, the +2 to hit and damage here, and then of course the +4 to hit and damage up here. I want to max out Exalted Smite because Exalted Smite's really good. 1 point in Divine Sacrifice is all you need. It's not about the extra +5d6 going up to 9d6 light damage. That's not important. It's just the fact that this has +1 critical multiplier on it that makes this attack good. And then grabbing all the other good stuff, such as the instant kill from Holy Retribution. Now, outside of that, I spend a few points in different places. One of the things you're going to notice is that this character does not use Sacred Defense. The reason for not using Sacred Defense is that little line that says plus 150% bonus threat generation. Threat generation is not good when you want to play as a melee, and this character does a reasonably high amount of damage. So if I have 150% bonus threat generation, that means I'm always going to pull aggro off of the tank, and that's pretty bad. A lot of big monsters have frontal area of effect attacks, so the monster will turn around and kill me and all my friends. As a result, you can't use this, and you have to get around not having this active. So instead, I use the Aasimar tree here, grabbing extra charisma, some healing amplification, some extra damage against evil targets, and then finally grabbing the Aasimar Bond of the Fallen for a vulnerability stacking. Vulnerability stacking means that every single time you hit a target, they take 1% more damage from all sources, up to 20% damage at 20 stacks, which is pretty good. A lot of weapons can do this, but unfortunately the Eidolon of Shadow can't do this. So this character needs another way to do that, and that's where the Ascendant Bond comes in the clutch. Now, if I'm spending 41 points here, and I have 16 points here, where do I spend the rest of my points? And my answer was Vistani Knife Fighter and Sacred Defender. Now, my character has 43 points spent in the tree, so if you are to follow along with this build guide, I would basically just, you only have 80 as a baseline if you don't have the extra 2 racial points and the 1 universal point from previous expansions. Then what I would do instead is just take points out of the Sacred Defender and drop down probably 2 points out of Sacred Armor Mastery. Keep the extra 1 Lay on Hands because having 3 is pretty useful, and then 1 Armor Mastery. Or actually, you have to drop all 3, so you drop 0 Armor Mastery, but the Lay on Hands is pretty good. I like Vistani Knife Fighter here in this build. It gives access to Haste Boost, which is extremely strong, and I would not recommend giving up, as well as getting 5% Double Strike here and 5% Double Strike here for an extra 10%. This means that my character, just standing around in town, is at 82% Double Strike, and then when I cast Zeal, it goes up to 92% Double Strike. It's not too bad. This character gets up to 92, and then I can use this ability here, Divine Purpose, to get an extra 5%, which is pretty good, bring me up to 97% double strike while I'm fighting individual monsters, so it's pretty good in that regard. The rest of the stuff in Vistani Night Fighting isn't that great, but double strike is nice, and you don't really have any other trees to put points in as of yet. Maybe more universal enhancement trees will come out that will change this, but that's what we've got so far. As far as the Epic Destiny goes, I play in Fatesinger. I feel like for this character, Fatesinger is kind of the one you want to be in. You could, if you wanted, use Fury of the Wild for Reapers, like, going through Reaper 10 and things. Fury of the Wild is extremely good for doing high Reapers, just because this effect, Overwhelming Force here, knocks down targets, so you can pretty much use your Adrenaline ability, Overwhelming Force to knock down whatever you want. Oh, is there a big scary Reaper, a Despair Reaper, any target? You pretty much get the opportunity to just delete it and remove it, so it's pretty good. I just generally prefer to play in Fatesinger. Out of Fatesinger here, we grab a whole bunch of Charisma. I pick up Bound Fate because Bound Fate's really strong. 1 point in range just to have this effect be able to proc every once in a while, because while the damage isn't substantial, it's just nice to have a little bit of extra damage. Taking Marshal him because it's better than my Capstone with how many stats it gives. I grab Blade Song for the attack speed and the critical multiplier roll. 5th Chord because I don't actually have access to True Seeing, which is pretty good. And then at the top here, I grab Turn of the Tide for an awesome cooldown, which you can just press all the time. It increases your damage by a tremendous, absolutely gargantuan amount, and it's very nice to have. And then finally, Quicken here, because I didn't take Quicken during the leveling process, and you get it for free. The things that I twist along with this, currently I am using Endless Smiting on a tier 4. Probably doesn't need to be a tier 4. I could rearrange this. But currently what I would normally have, I should actually probably reset this real quick. Whoops. I've got a Dance of Flowers down here, extra action boost, meld into darkness, and Endless Smiting. I do still think that Endless Smiting is very good. I think you could probably shift some of the stuff around. I like Endless Smiting for getting more Smite Evils since they regenerate 30% faster, and getting the extra ones is kind of nice. Smite Evil is a really powerful attack, and you want to be able to press this as much as possible. Meld into Darkness is because I play in Endgame, and having a button to press that makes it so you don't get attacked in melee combat is really, really strong. Extra action boost is helpful because I don't have a lot of action boosts in general, and I use Prowess as my filigree set, and a Dance of Flowers is for a bunch of extra melee damage. So that kind of works out there. As far as like keeping myself sustained, I have cure spells I can just cast on myself to heal, as well as my lay on hands as well. So I do have the ability to heal for a little bit when I need it. As my items go, I mentioned before that I was using the Idol of Shadow. The item sets that I'm actually using are the Sanctified Fervor Filigree set, which is really useful because it gives you, when you activate Smite Evil, you gain melee power and based on your religious lore. So this is 25 melee power when I use Smite. And then I use Prowess for an extra 50 melee power when I use an action boost. These are both very, very good. The exact filigree setup will again be in the forum post if you want to see that. Outside of that, this character is using the Part of the Family set with the Legendary Enforcer Coat, the Family's Blessing, and the Legendary Hammer Fist. The Family's Blessing is used here because it gives double strike, and then I get Insightful double strike from the Hammer Fist. My artifact of choice is the Bright Lord, the Sigil of Flame. This item is very, very good because it grants me extra charisma, the speed 30, and armor piercing as well. So armor piercing with insightful armor piercing means I can penetrate pretty much every single thing that I need to penetrate, as well as extra smites. This goes well with the Titania's Glory, which also gives extra smites, which stack for some reason, and this also grants me Crown of Summer, allowing me to get some extra melee power. Now the other item set I'm using is the Winter set, which is 4 pieces right here. I have the Deep Snow Boots, which pretty much everybody uses. Insightful Constitution and Quality Constitution is kind of hard to beat. Then I have the Cloak of Winter because I needed something else, and this doesn't really grant any important stats, but it gives me cold absorption at the very least. The Direwolf Belt, which grants Deception and basically nothing else. The Shield bonus 21 is not too bad, but Deception is the main thing. And then finally, I have the Ring of Winter's Chill. Now, the Ring of Winter's Chill actually gives me no stats, but it gives me the 4-piece set, which is a 20% bonus to maximum hit points, so I'm not going to complain too much about that. In theory, if I wanted, I could actually replace a few of these items, get rid of 2 of these pieces, like the Cloak and possibly the Belt, and instead get a 2-piece Legendary Green Steel set for, I think, the same amount of health, or maybe a little bit less health, and then actually have a free ring slot where I can put in something, but for now, this is pretty good. Then I have the Celestial Ruby Ring, because I needed to get some extra stats, so it's got Dexterity, Stunning, and Accuracy on it, because I don't have Stunning or Accuracy anywhere else in the build. I don't need the Ghostly, but it is nice since it makes it so it's harder for me to be hit. I have the Collective Sight on, which has Constitution, Insightful, Charisma to fill up those last stats. And then finally I have the Blood Rage Chrism. And the Blood Rage Chrism is one of the best items you can get for two-handed fighting, because its abilities here, Blood Rage Defense and Rune Fueled Warding, give you a huge amount of additional defense, as well as Calamitous Blows, granting you a stacking bonus to Double Strike. This item is extremely good, and if you're playing as a two-handed fighting character, you pretty much have to use this one. So this is the item set that I have. The only stat that it's missing that's important is Quality Charisma. I just couldn't fit it into the build anywhere here. But as I said, if I did want to try to fit it in, I could get 2 pieces of Legendary Green Steel, replace this, and then try to fit something in here that maybe can get the Quality Charisma, maybe a Slave Lord's crafted item, I'm not entirely sure, but that's something that I'm not particularly doing right now. This is my gear set as it stands. The only thing I'm missing are a couple nice augments that would help out here. One of the major ones is an augment set that you can get from Too Hot to Handle, called the Alluring Elocution, which grants you +4 artifact bonus to Charisma. I would love to get that, and getting that plus Quality Charisma would give me an extra 8 points, bringing me up from 89 up to 97, which would be pretty cool. However, I don't have that many pieces from Too Hot to Handle, and while I run it every week, you need to get 3 different copies of the Tattered Scrolls of the Broken Ones, which is kind of hard to come by. So we'll see if we can actually get that in the future. Anyways, those are the items I'm currently running, and that's what I recommend you run here. Most of these things are pretty easy to acquire. If anything, the only 2 pieces of raid gear, this one from Babala Saga. Babala Saga is a very easy raid to run, and so a lot of people could use the Blood Rage Chrism. It's not too bad to get. And then this one, the Family's Blessing from Project Nemesis. Again, Project Nemesis is a pretty commonly run raid. It's the easier raid in Sharn, and it's not too difficult to learn. Watch a couple videos, and you should be right and ready to go and get yourself one of these, as it's a very, very useful item, and it's used in pretty much almost every single melee build out there, and sometimes, no, it's actually just melee builds. I was going to say the other version of this, the Family Recruit Sigil, is sometimes used in range builds, but this one is double strike, so it definitely wouldn't. But still, extremely powerful item. Highly recommend you get one if you can. If you want to do serious melee stuff, you're almost always going to throw in one of these into your build. And then Bright Lord is just an artifact, so go get Bright Lord. Anyways, that is all I have for you today. If you like this character build and are interested to see more, make sure you subscribe to the channel, because I'm going to be posting more character builds similar to this, as this is one of my first replacement endgame characters before I start moving on to next characters as I revamp them for more modern builds in 2021. And if you want to see how these characters actually perform, and especially go through the process, make sure you go to twitch.tv/Strimtom to see them live, so you can see how I build them, put them together, and where they come from. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. Thank you for watching. I'm very tired, and my throat hurts.